The sun drifts low over the Brazos, its light like dying embers on the plains. Caldwell's Crossing exhales the slow rhythm of survival. A hammer striking at the forge, a church bell sighing, dust curling under wagon wheels. Sheriff Amos Kettering stands at the edge of town, his coat heavy with grit, scanning the far ridges where the land folds into blue haze. Something feels wrong, though no word has yet named it. The horses shy at nothing, and the children grow quiet without knowing why. Eleanor Voss closes the shutters of her schoolhouse, feeling the stillness press against the windows like a held breath. In the tall grass a mile away, Tala watches from her horse, the sunset glinting on the edge of her obsidian knife. The wind carries whispers, not words but intent, and she knows the time of warning is closing fast. Night settles like ash over Caldwell's Crossing. Lanterns flicker in windows, their glow small and uncertain. The people eat in silence, listening to the wind press against their doors. Somewhere beyond the fields, coyotes cry, yet beneath their call lies something deeper, a rhythmic pulse like hooves, too distant to name. Amos Kettering leans at the window of the sheriff's office, his reflection in the glass merging with the dark beyond, his hand resting near the Colt on his belt. At the schoolhouse, Eleanor lies awake, the children's drawings fluttering on the wall. She hears a horse whinny far off, and the faint jingle of metal. Reaching for her husband's stopped pocket watch, she winds it once, though it will not move. Tomorrow, she whispers, though the word tastes false. Out beyond the creek, Tala kneels among the grass, tracing symbols into the dirt, marks of warning. Her horse shifts nervously. She looks toward the town lights, her breath trembling. They will not hear, she says softly in Comanche. Above her, clouds gather like smoke before fire. Near midnight, the wind dies. Even the crickets fall silent. Jonas steps out from his forge and looks toward the north ridge, where a flicker of red glows faintly through the dark. Amos, he murmurs, the name swallowed by emptiness. Somewhere far away, a drum begins, one slow beat, steady and patient as the heart of the plains. By dawn, the horizon bleeds a thin copper light. Tracks cut across the dust north of Caldwell's Crossing. Dozens of them sharp and deliberate, the sign of riders moving like ghosts. Sheriff Amos Kettering kneels over the prints, tracing the edges with his gloved fingers, feeling the depth of the hooves and the shape of the threat. Beside him, Jonas watches silently, jaw tight, while the wind flutters the hem of his work coat. The silence of the plains presses close, thick with expectancy. Far beyond the ridge, the Comanche scouts move unseen, their horses low to the ground, their faces painted with shadow and ash. Tala rides among them, her eyes drawn back toward the town she tried to save, her spirit pulled between the worlds of vengeance and mercy. The riders are many, and the town sleeps still. The settlers gather in the square as word spreads of the tracks. Fear crawls through the crowd like a fever. Amos speaks quietly but firmly, telling them to stay inside and keep their rifles ready. He hides his own dread behind duty, watching faces pale as clouds pass over the sun. Eleanor stands near the church steps, clutching her shawl, her eyes locked on the northern hills where the wind never seems to stop. Jonas hammers iron into rough blades, kitchen knives reforged into weapons. Each strike rings hollow, echoing through the open doors of the forge. His thoughts drift to the last raid, to screams he can still hear. He forges not from courage, but from guilt. Tala watches the war camp form. Warriors move with ritual grace, painting faces, tightening reins, whispering prayers. She stands apart, the symbol she drew in the dirt still vivid in her mind. The chief's shadow crosses her face, and his eyes tell her what words cannot. There will be no mercy tonight. As dusk falls again, Amos rides the ridge alone. The sky burns copper and violet. He spots the distant flicker of fires, too many to count. In that moment, the wind shifts. carrying the faint echo of a drumbeat. It matches the rhythm of his heart. He knows what it means. The Shadow Riders have come. The sun sinks behind the ridges, casting Caldwell's crossing into bruised twilight. The town has gone still. Not peaceful still, but the kind that waits for something to happen. Inside the church, the settlers whisper prayers. Outside, the wind carries faint drumming from the plains. Amos stations men on rooftops, rifles ready, though he knows it won't matter. The silence of the prairie has changed. It hums, alive with threat. In the distance, flickers of movement glide along the grass like shadows come to life. Eleanor gathers the children inside the schoolhouse, her voice steady, though her hands tremble. She leads them in reciting a hymn, the words faltering as the wind rattles the shutters. One small boy begins to cry and she hushes him, whispering that dawn will bring safety. She does not believe it, but her lie is a kindness. On the ridge, Tala watches her people preparing for the strike. The firelight dances over painted faces and sharpened weapons. She rides forward to speak to Chief Red Hand, but he raises a hand, not in anger, but in finality. His gaze says everything. The path has been chosen. Tala lowers her head, the weight of both worlds pressing on her shoulders. In the blacksmith's forge, Jonas sharpens the last blade. He wipes sweat from his brow and looks out into the night where the horizon burns with unseen fires. His heart pounds in rhythm with the hammer he lays down. He thinks of Eleanor, her calm voice steadying frightened children. He knows he won't see her again, though he can't say why. The wind shifts again. From every direction, riders appear, dark shapes against the starlit grass. The circle closes around the town, silent and complete. Amos feels it before he sees it. The air itself thickens. He looks toward the church, where Eleanor's hymn fades into stillness. For a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. Then the first torch is lit. The camp at the mouth of the Little Bighorn still sleeps beneath a veil of chill mist. Inside his canvas shelter, Custer bends over his small field desk while the oil lamp flickers and smokes. The flame makes his shadow dance across the canvas like a restless echo. He writes slowly, pausing to blot the page, each movement deliberate. Outside, the low murmur of horses, the muted clank of tinware, and a distant cough remind him that 1,000 men breathe the same pre-dawn air, waiting for his work. The letter he writes is brief. A few lines of tenderness and conviction, the tone of a man who suspects the day ahead will demand everything he owns. When the ink dries, he presses the paper flat with his palm, folds it, and slips it into the inner pocket of his coat beside his heart. A moment later, the bugle calls the first note of assembly, thin and cold, as the morning light seeping through the seams of the tent. Outside, frost whitens the grass. Captain Miles Keogh moves among the tethered horses, adjusting saddles and straps, murmuring to his mount, Comanche. The animal stamps once, uneasy. Far to the east, a faint red glow rises behind rolling hills. A crow wheels overhead, its cry cutting through the brittle air. Some of the Irish troopers mutter a prayer against bad luck. Keogh glances up at the dark shape crossing the light and crosses himself, the motion small but steady. He senses that this day carries the weight of every campaign he has survived, that the end of it will not resemble any he has known. As the sun climbs above the ridges, the camp bursts into motion. Bugles call, mules bray, canteens rattle. Troopers tighten belts and roll their sleeves. Custer strides through the haze of cooking fires and dust, his voice brisk, confident, measured for the ears that need certainty more than truth. Officers mount up in turn. Reno, Benteen, Keogh, Godfrey, each silent, each already divided between duty and doubt. From the valley below drifts the faint sound of drums, slow and steady, almost mistaken for the beating of the earth itself. Custer halts on a rise, surveys the line of riders, and gives the order to move. The columns begin to snake across the grass, sunlight flashing on brass buckles, on rifle barrels, on the edges of drawn breath. The order comes shortly after 7. From the ridge line above the river, Custer lifts his arm, the gesture sharp and confident. The same motion that had begun victories at Gettysburg, Washita, and countless skirmishes across the plains. The men know the signal before the bugle sounds. Divide the command. Reno will ride to the south and strike the encampment head-on. Bentignon will sweep wide to the left and guard the flank. Custer himself will circle north to trap the enemy between the wings. It is a bold maneuver, too bold for the numbers his scouts have whispered. Yet in that moment, beneath a rising sun that turns every blade of grass to gold, the plan feels inevitable. The valley below looks peaceful from this height. A stretch of green and brown winding with silver water, the faint smoke of campfires drifting upward. No one can yet see the scale of what lies beyond the river bends. The sound of hoofbeats builds as the detachments pull apart. What begins as organization soon becomes distance. Then Custer watches. Reno's column fade into dust and hears only the rhythmic thunder of hooves and the creak of leather as his own men turn north. The act of dividing the regiment seems to split the morning itself. One half bright, one half shadow. By mid-morning, the valley opens before them in all its deceptive calm. The river twists through green meadows and willow thickets. Beyond it stretch hundreds of conical lodges, their hides gleaming pale against the earth. Thin columns of smoke rise straight into windless air. For a breathless minute, no one speaks. Then a low rumble begins, faint at first, like thunder rolling below the surface of the world. The drumming swells until it fills the valley, joined by shouts and the bark of dogs. Warriors on painted ponies burst from the far side of the camp, streaks of red, yellow, and black against the grass. Custer reins in his horse at the crest of a bluff. From this height, he can see the sheer enormity of what awaits, an encampment far larger than any he was told existed. Thousands, perhaps more. The wind lifts his hair across his face. For the first time, his breath catches. He raises his field glass and traces the movement of the warriors forming lines along the river. Still, he does not call retreat. Instead, he lowers the glass, draws his pistol, and gives the signal to advance. The bugle's cry cuts through the morning air, a note bright, defiant, and final. The 7th Cavalry begins its descent into legend. The command ascends the long slope toward the Little Bighorn shortly before noon. The column stretches for nearly a mile, a living ribbon of movement dusted in gold by the rising heat. To the east, the river flashes like a blade between the folds of hills. To the west, the grasslands roll endlessly until swallowed by haze. Every man feels the strange hush that comes before violence, the world holding its breath. Custer rides ahead, his silhouette crisp against the glare, hand resting on the ivory handle of his revolver. He believes destiny favors the bold. Behind him, Keo mutters a prayer in Gaelic, while Godfrey silently counts each hoofbeat as though numbers might stave off the inevitable. The horses breathe hard, their nostrils dark with sweat and dust. From far off comes the faint crack of a rifle. Just one, but enough to turn every head. At the ford, the men slow, horses plunging knee-deep through cold water. The sound is sudden and overwhelming, the splash of hooves, the clatter of equipment, the breath of beasts. Beyond the opposite bank, the valley opens like a vast amphitheater. Wisps of smoke rise in neat vertical lines, too numerous to count. Custer halts midstream, water glinting on his boots, scanning the far slope. He sees nothing moving, yet senses eyes upon them. The silence that follows feels staged, deliberate. Forward, he calls, voice carrying over the current. The river reflects his face, pale, unyielding, already half a month. To the south, Reno's detachment bursts from the tree line and storms into the village edge. The first lodges erupt in chaos, women running, children scattering, warriors mounting in haste. For several breathless minutes, the soldiers press forward, firing into smoke and confusion. Then, from the far end of the camp, riders surge out in hundreds, their ponies painted with lightning bolts and handprints. The sound becomes a storm. Drums, rifles, the high, piercing cry of victory songs. Reno's line wavers, his men caught between discipline and terror. They fire wildly, retreating toward the timber, leaving bodies and broken flags in the trampled dust. From his distant ridge, Custer sees the dust cloud twist and swell. He cannot know the extent of the disaster, only that the battle has begun without him. Custer halts his men on the northern ridge, the sound of Reno's firefight drifting upward like distant thunder. Below, the valley swarms, hundreds of riders emerging from cottonwood shadows. Their movement so fluid it seems the land itself has come alive. Keough glances to his commander. No order is needed. The men already form skirmish lines, kneeling beside their horses, loading carbines with mechanical rhythm. The first bullets hiss past like insects. A horse screams. Custer shouts for them to hold steady, his voice clear and unbroken. The line bends, reforms, bends again. They are surrounded before most realize it. To the east, a fresh wave of warriors crests the hill, their feathers slicing the sunlight. The world contracts to the space between heartbeat and trigger pull. Afternoon blazes down mercilessly. The ridge is a furnace of dust and lead. Troopers fall by twos and threes. Ammunition boxes lie empty, canteens overturned. Keough drops beside Comanche, whispering a final prayer as the animal collapses, legs folded beneath him. Bloody knife, struck in the chest, falls backward without a sound. Eyes fixed on the sky. Custer fires his last rounds into the advancing tide, each shot swallowed by the roar that surrounds him. Smoke blots out the sun until the world becomes a shifting sepia haze. Then, abruptly, it is over. The gunfire ceases, replaced by the moan of wind and the rustle of grass. When the haze clears, the slope is strewn with still forms. The 7th Cavalry is gone, and the valley holds its breath once more. In the distance, ravens begin to circle, black specks against the white blaze of afternoon. For a brief moment, the Missouri wind carries the faint scent of gunpowder and wild sage, mingled like memory and myth. The valley lies quiet beneath a shroud of smoke. Noon passes unmarked, only the flies and the wind remain. The sound of battle has faded into a ghostly hum that drifts through scorched grass and torn banners. Captain Bentine's detachment, arriving too late, halts on the ridge above. He removes his hat, the gesture neither salute nor prayer, merely the recognition of ruin. The soldiers dismount in stunned silence. Far below, the once bright blue coats of the 7th Cavalry lie scattered like bits of sky fallen to earth. The river glitters cruelly, indifferent to the dead. 2 days later, Lieutenant Godfrey rides along the riverbank where cottonwoods bend in the wind. He searches not for glory, but for understanding. Beneath a tangle of roots and half-washed soil, something catches his eye, a bit of weathered leather protruding from the earth. Kneeling, he brushes away mud until the outline of a small dispatch pouch appears. He knows immediately whose hand buried it. Inside, the paper is still legible. Ink bled at the edges, words precise and damning. It is Custer's rewritten order, the one that defied command. That evening, Godfrey sits by campfire glow, the recovered papers spread across his lap. The rewritten order bears Custer's confident script. I shall act independently to strike the enemy before our coordination delays our success. Next to it lies the letter addressed to Libby, its seal broken in the chaos. The words are tender, almost fragile. Godfrey reads them once, twice, then folds the pages carefully. He understands the secret now, ambition and love intertwined. each sealing the other's fate. Weeks later, the survivors returned to Fort Abraham Lincoln. The summer light feels harsher now, stripped of its romance. Libby Custer stands at the gate as the column approaches. She counts faces, then stops, understanding the truth before any man speaks. Godfrey dismounts and approaches her, hat held against his chest. He cannot bring himself to hand her the rewritten order. Instead, he gives her the folded letter, the one meant for her heart, not for history. That night, in her quarters, Libby opens both letters, the one from her husband and the one silently delivered by fate. She reads until the lamp gutters low. Outside, the prairie wind sighs against the shutters. She understands that the story of George Armstrong Custer will not be written by what he did, but by what she chooses to say. When morning comes, she locks the rewritten order inside her chest of keepsakes, unseen by any historian's eye. The prairie beyond the fort hums with crickets and ghostly echoes of the 7th Cavalry. The secret remains buried, first beneath the Missouri, then beneath silence itself. Winter settles over Fort Abraham Lincoln, bringing long nights and the mournful whistle of the prairie wind. In her quarters, Libby Custer sits by a dying fire, reading her husband's last letter for what must be the 100th time. The ink has faded to the color of dried roses. She whispers his words aloud, not as lament, but as ritual. Every sentence feels like a prayer. Every pause, a heartbeat she keeps alive through memory. Years later, men from Washington arrive. Historians, reporters, and opportunists eager to preserve the Custer legend. They bring questions sharp as bayonets. Libby greets them with grace, offering tea and carefully measured words. "My husband was brave," she tells them, "and he died doing his duty." She does not mention the rewritten order or the buried pouch. Truth, she has learned, serves history best when clothed in silence. Lieutenant Godfrey visits Libby in the autumn of his later years. His hair has gone gray, his eyes hollow from campaigns and sleepless memories. He sits beside her fire and speaks softly. "I read both letters that day." She nods, unsurprised. Between them, the air feels heavy with ghosts. "He rewrote his orders, didn't he?" she asks. Godfrey hesitates, then says, "Yes, but maybe that was the only way he could face the man he wanted to be." Neither speaks again for a long time. Decades pass. Libby moves from fort to fort, from New York parlors to lecture halls, defending her husband's honor with unwavering devotion. The legend grows. Books, speeches, and romantic paintings that transform defeat into destiny. In every retelling, the truth remains tucked away, safe within her chest of keepsakes. To the world, she becomes the widow of America's golden cavalryman. To herself, she remains the keeper of a secret too heavy for history. In her final years, Libby returns once more to the plains. The land has changed. Fences and telegraph poles cutting through what was once endless sky. Standing by the Missouri River, she closes her eyes and hears the faint echoes of hoofbeats carried on the wind. She feels no anger, only release. When she passes, the chest containing her husband's hidden order remains unopened. Years later, a rancher's plow will turn the earth near that same riverbank, uncovering a fragment of decayed parchment. History will call it a relic. The wind will call it the truth.